kept getting knockbacks at interview stage because I didn't have experience in brand management. Although I just really felt I could do it. I really knew in my gut that I could do it, and I knew marketing. I'd done a degree in marketing. I loved it. I loved the whole space. So it was really frustrating for me. So I remember one day driving home and saying to myself, you know what, I'm actually not going to put any more effort into finding a new job. I'm going to start something of my own.
You're listening to Not My First Guess. I'm Hattie Willis, your host, and each episode I talk to an entrepreneur, investor, startup expert to unpack their hardest moments, biggest wins, and hard-earned advice so we can shortcut our learnings as founders together. On today's episode, I'm joined by Ellie Webb. Ellie is a first-time founder who launched Caleño, a non-alcoholic drinks brand, after experiencing the lack of non-alcoholic options firsthand during dry January, and simultaneously feeling she wasn't learning fast enough or what she wanted to be learning in her day job. Caleño has both direct-to-consumer and traditional retail channels, including Sainsburys, Waitrose and M&S, and restaurant chains. In this episode, she shares how she ended up in the right mindset for entrepreneurship, a pivotal trip to Colombia and how it shaped the brand, the surprise opportunity to launch in their first supermarket, lessons learned as a solo founder, and the one time you really don't want to hear your product is on fire. So without further ado, let's get started. So first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us today, Ellie.
Happy to be here, Hattie. Very excited.
There's so much I want to dig in from my research and looking at the brand. It's a really exciting story. And I want to start there. How did Caleño start?
Yeah, so it was around about 5 years ago, but it was 2017. And I actually worked at the time in the drinks industry. I worked for a company called Mac Clark. They were wholesalers, so they mostly supplied pubs, bars and restaurants. And I found myself after what was quite a boozy Christmas period, December, lots of Christmas parties, lots of opportunities to drink alcohol. I found myself at the beginning of 2017 actually wanting to take some time off alcohol and have a bit of a detox and just do a little thing called dry January, which was becoming a bigger thing. So I went into that year setting myself a bit of a challenge. But what I didn't want to do was not drink at all and not go out with my friends and socialise. So I found myself still wanting to go out, see my friends. I can remember one night going to a music night to watch a Latin funk band, and my friends weren't doing dry January. They were just normal night out for them. And I went to the bar to order a drink, and when you get to the bar and you suddenly don't know what you want to drink, because normally I would order a G&T or a craft beer or something. That's what everyone else was ordering. And I panicked. I didn't know what to order as a non-drinker. So I panicked and I ordered a Diet Coke. And I think I had about 2 of those and then decided that I didn't want to drink that all night. So just literally opted for plain old water, which I think at the time was fine. But I kept looking back at it and I was like, why is it that the options are pretty rubbish when it comes to not drinking? And there were so many times where I just didn't want to drink loads. And particularly because I worked in an industry where I was surrounded by alcohol, there's lots of temptation to drink all the time, and I didn't want to. Especially I was getting into my late 20s and had enough of big night outs and hangovers. Kept coming back to that moment, and there were plenty of other times throughout the month and during Challenge in January where I didn't want to drink alcohol, but felt like I was forced into a situation where I might have to because the options were so dire. And that's where the idea started from. I think I went into that year thinking about my career and what I was going to do next, and finding myself in a stage of my life where I progressed quite quickly at the company I was at and had lots of different roles, but I was left still wanting more, certainly on the brand side and growing the brand. So I think I just saw an opportunity there and saw a gap in the market, which I guess what I realise now is, entrepreneurs do. They spot gaps in the market and they do something about it. And so that was the beginning of my journey with Caleño.
One thing I'm curious about, you knew you didn't want to be in a corporate big organization forever. You knew you wanted to have ownership in your own thing. How much was it a case of, as you say, you went into the new year knowing that you were ready for a new thing and it just happened? Or how much were you on the lookout for a new idea? Were you weighing up options, looking at markets, really on the hunt for your startup?
Yeah, I think looking back at this now, I didn't realize at the time, but I was definitely in the right mindset and the right mind
Mm.
frame. And I specifically remember, before this night out in January, I was driving home one day from work. And I think in the previous year, I had been interviewing, I've been going for different roles. I really wanted to manage a brand. And at the time, I was managing lots of different brands. It was more business to business. And I really wanted to help shape a brand, help grow a brand in the consumer space. So that meant marketing directly to consumers, which in my current position, although it was a fun role, I wasn't doing that. Because that was a real desire and an urge for me. And I kept getting knockbacks at interview stage because I didn't have experience in brand management. Although I just really felt I could do it. I really knew in my gut that I could do it. And I knew marketing. I'd done a degree in marketing. I loved it. I loved the whole space. So it was really frustrating for me. So I remember one day driving home and saying to myself, you know what? I'm actually not going to put any more effort into finding a new job. I'm going to start something of my own. And at that point, I didn't know what. But I was determined I was going to start something and actually go, you know what, if no one's going to give me a chance and opportunity, I'm just going to find something of my own and do that. So I was in that mindset. And I think that was important because it meant I was open to ideas. I was more aware of what was going on around me. And I think that coupled with then the situation that I found myself in January and also working in the drinks industry and understanding that space, the three things combined just meant that it was the right time and I was in the right mindset and there was an opportunity I could see really clearly that perhaps other people couldn't because they weren't in that mindset or mind frame.
I love that idea that you're ready, but it still has to wait for the right idea. So you've
Mm.
now got your right idea. You've found this space that's underserved. You've experienced it. You've lived that frustration. So what's next? Where did you go from having that epiphany moment? How did you break down the idea? Did you quit your job the next day? What was the next step?
Yeah, I'm quite impulsive, but fortunately, my other half is very risk averse, so he's convinced me not to. No, I wasn't going to quit my job the next day. The first thing I did was actually just do research, actually find out what was out there. Although I worked in the drinks industry, I didn't know everything about the drinks industry. So I actually did some research and found out, okay, I've gone out and I can't really find any alcohol alternatives. And by that, I meant grown up drinks that actually feel and taste and look like alcoholic drinks, but just without the alcohol. That's what I wanted. I wanted to replicate my G&T moment. And so I went out looking to see what was about, what was in the market, and there really wasn't much. There were a few bigger beer brands. You had Seedlip, of course, which I came across, who were still quite niche and small at the time, and of course they then became the market leader in this category years later. So there really wasn't much out there. And then I started researching, how could I make this product? I felt it was possible because there were other brands and there were other products doing it, albeit at quite an early stage, but it made me feel that it wasn't a completely new thing, that this path had been trodden before. And I just simply had to work out how and find the right people. So it probably was a period of 2 or 3 months of exploration and just scoping out the landscape, really just fleshing out a little bit more about what it could possibly be.
And how quickly did you think about the business model behind it? Because obviously there's a few big components to your business, right? It's got to taste great, so it's got to actually mimic that experience. There's the branding side, and then there's the business model. And I think I'd love to touch a little bit on the difference between, as you say, you were looking to move into that consumer facing space, but actually also what's interesting is you haven't gone purely direct to consumer. You've also gone through big grocers. You're looking at hospitality as a big market for you. So how much were you thinking at the early stages about the business model, or was it around the recipe or the brand first? What was the order, or did it all come at once?
There was an order later, much later along the line. I actually put together a bit of a project plan and treated it a bit like a project. I've done a bit of project management in previous roles. But first of all, I think one really pivotal moment for me was a trip I did over to South America, specifically Colombia, where I would say I actually got a lot of inspiration for the brand itself and turned what was an idea into more of a concept. And that really helped me on a few fronts. It helped me with the brand in terms of what I wanted the brand to stand for, and how the brand began to take shape in terms of just traveling around this wonderful country where I have family, and actually seeing the cities and landscapes for myself, and going to these really colourful and wonderful towns and cities, going to visit some of the fruit markets, and just reacquainting myself with all these amazing fruits that I would have when I was younger, and my grandma would use to make what they call jugos for me. I just began to really imagine how this product and this idea could start to take shape. That was a really pivotal trip for me, because I had this trip planned for a little while, and I went on this trip thinking I'm either going to come back and just get back to my day job. It was a 3 or 4 week trip around the entire country. And I thought I'm either going to come back and go back to my day job and just forget about this whole thing. And it wasn't a nice idea to think about, but actually let's get back to reality. Or what actually ended up happening was I went on this trip and I came back just bursting with ideas about ingredients that I could include in the distillation, ideas for the branding. There's so much richness and culture in that Colombian heritage I wanted to explore and play around with. So actually I came back really enthused and excited about trying to bring some shape to this brand. So you asked about, what order did it all come in? I think that trip was in June, so around 5 or 6 months after I had the original idea. Prior to that, I'd obviously done research. I then started to take the idea through to a concept and start to build things, pillars like what the branding could be, starting to think about names. Actually, names, I probably did some things that were not that important to begin with. Like, I bought a website with a name I didn't end up using. So don't do that. Don't, like, it's really easy to rush into things that actually, when you look back, are just really not important. It's actually more important to understand the core of your brand and your mission and your purpose for bringing this brand to the market. And that's what I was starting to understand. I wanted to show people that they could have fun when they chose not to drink, because I didn't think it was particularly fun. And I saw this amazing South American, vibrant, colourful culture, and I wanted to take inspiration from that and bring that into my brand. And also I wanted to include these amazing exotic tropical fruits and bring them into the distillation. So those were a few key things for me, and then everything else started to follow from that.
It's so interesting you talk about buying the website early. And I think, why do you think there is that temptation? Because we've all felt it. If you've started an idea, or if you're, listening and you're at the start of something new, there is this temptation to do something tangible, maybe that we can click, that we can see, maybe we can show our parents to reassure them we're not wasting our lives, something like that. But what drove you to feel like that was the next step you had to take? You had to buy the domain.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe it just, a lot of entrepreneurs are quite impatient. I'm quite impatient and sometimes impulsive. So I wanted some quick wins, and I wanted to feel like I was making progress, when actually I remember someone saying to me, and I can't remember who, but really, to do things well, particularly with a product business, it can take, I would challenge anyone to bring a product to market any sooner than 2 years. I mean, I'm sure you can do it. A year and a half ago, I was still working my job, so I could have gone faster, but some things I couldn't speed up. It took about 2 years from idea to literally getting the product to market. That just takes time. And so I think sometimes to have these quick, easy wins where you go, I've got a website, I've got a name, I've registered on Companies House, or all of these things that are quite quick and easy to do. But you do them and then you go, oh, actually, I probably need to change the name because that's not quite right. I didn't really think that through. Yeah. So it's really tempting and easy to do that. And as long as you're not investing loads of money and time, that's fine. And as long as they're reversible decisions, that's okay, more or less. Because you learn along the way, actually, that's not the most important thing. And I could have waited. And it will chop and change. But that's probably the reason that we want to see progress being made.
So in hindsight, were there guesses that you were making at those early stages that you weren't conscious of and that you wish you'd been testing sooner, or unknowns that you really had to stumble across before you became aware of them?
I did what I thought was right, but I still backed that up with real tangible evidence. So to give you an example, when I was developing the product and it was in its quite early stages, I knew that the concept of a non-alcoholic spirit was new to a lot of people, myself included. And I also knew that I wanted the product to be of a really high quality, and I knew I didn't want to put it out on the market unless it was. I didn't feel equipped to make that decision on my own. So what I would do is I would take early stage samples, first of all to friends and families and get them to try it. But a lot of the time they want to be nice and they're not always going to give you the truth, or they might say, yeah, it's lovely. So what I then did was actually take it to strangers, bar owners, restaurant owners. I would go around Bristol on my day off, or a weekend, or into London, and I would go with my samples and just walk into a bar and explain to them what I was doing and that I was trying to create non-alcoholic spirit. And it was really early stages, and I would love their feedback and would they be willing to try it. And they would give me a really honest opinion. So it demonstrated to me that this was becoming a quality that I would be happy with. I wasn't quite ready at the time because I think I was doing these maybe a year or so. I think I first started doing it towards the end of the first year of having the idea. But it started to give me confidence that people in the restaurant trade were really loving this idea and really backed it. And some even let me come in and sample with their customers so I could get feedback directly from the consumer. So it gave me confidence in what I was doing. It also gave me really valuable feedback that I could take back and make tweaks and iteration to distillation and inevitably end up with a better product because of it. So where I did make guesses, I then went and backed it up with opinions that weren't just my own.
And so you've tested the desire in the market. You've got this feedback from bar owners. I love that they're letting you test with their customers. That's a great show of faith that you're onto the right track. So at what point does this kind of exploration, this testing become sales? When did you start actively selling to bars? And obviously you've also sold through supermarkets. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, not for a little while. I did a lot of testing and there was a lot of work to be done on the branding. That took a while. It wasn't until 2019 when I launched that I started selling to pubs and bars and restaurants, and not even them to begin with. It was still really early days for them, this whole concept, non-alcoholic. Actually, supermarkets were a little bit quicker off the mark.
Interesting.
When it came to stocking non-alcoholic options. And really my plan to begin with was just to sell to direct to consumer. So I'd set up a website, spent a bit of money on getting it done. I had a really early test bed website where I sold my first 100 orders and shipped them out, packed them up at home and sent them out with a note saying this is bottle number 10. And then after that, so that was my very first website, which was done by a friend. Then the second website I spent, I don't know, £3,000 or £4,000 on, spent a bit more money. And that's what I launched with in 2019. And that was the plan. I think what changed that plan was a conversation that I had with someone from Sainsburys back in probably 6 months prior to launching. I wasn't selling at the time. I'd gone to a festival in Spitalfield Market. It was called the Mindful Drinking Festival. It's still around today. I think it's coming back this year. And it's a festival celebrating lots of non-alcoholic options, alcohol-free options. So it's a place people can go, and they usually have it twice a year, one in summer, one in January. And it's a great place because you can actually go and sample lots of different options. So I went there actually hoping to get consumer feedback, which I did, lots of it. But I also met with someone from Sainsburys who was going around trying the products and were interested in this category because it's quite up and coming. Had a conversation with them who they were really interested in the brand and the flavour and the quality of the liquid, and said they would be in touch the following week, which they were. And then a few months later, a conversation developed with the buyer who was then looking to establish a bit more of a non-alcoholic drinks range, a premium non-alcoholic drinks range. So we entered into a conversation and ended up at a place where we were due to be going to 500 of their stores 3 months after launching, where my original plan was just to be on ecom. So I'd only produced 1,000 bottles. That was my first production run. And then suddenly I'm in a situation where I need to find a way to produce 6,000 for my first order. So that was a bit of a challenge, but an interesting one.
So let's just dive into that challenge a bit. So you'd gone to this consumer event not expecting to meet a buyer from Sainsburys who was already sold on the non-alcoholic space and looking for brands. How long did you have to turn around changing your first production run from 1,000 to 6,000?
Not long at all. We had the conversation in December. It all got agreed around Christmas time, and the stock was due into their warehouses in mid-Feb. So I had a month and a half, and I didn't have a bottler. Because the bottler that I used first of all for my first 1,000, I wasn't happy with. The quality was awful on the labelling, so I had to find a new bottler.
And is this the story where you had to rebottle every bottle at Christmas time? Is that right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was devastated. I was so excited about my very first batch, and we're doing it at scale because I could bottle at home. The most I'd ever done was I had the first 100 that I mentioned to you. It was incredibly time consuming. I got all the equipment to do it, and I could do it in small scale, but there's no way it would have taken me so long to do 1,000, and I wouldn't have wanted to. So I needed to start to scale up, and that was the very lowest amount that a bottler would take on. And it was back and forth, phone calls, trying to get hold of the person that owned the company. It just wouldn't answer my calls. Not important to them. We're a tiny brand. I think I even drove up with all the ingredients ready and it was like a 4 or 5 hour journey. So it was a really frustrating process, and there was really not much I could do. And then finally get the bottles through the line, packaged up, ready to go. And I get a call from the warehouse guys that are storing my bottles, and they say, we thought we should just let you know that we've got the bottles safe and sound. However, there's a bit of a problem with the labels. They're just really bubbling. And they sent a couple of pictures, and honestly, I just broke down and cried because I think where they'd been bottled, where it was quite cold, talking December.
Yeah.
And they'd been bottled in quite a cold environment. And so when the labels originally went on smoothly, because it was damp underneath, I guess, it just created these bubbles, which just from a quality perspective did not look great, and I was not happy with. And so I was then in a situation where I was thinking, well, what the hell do I do? So what I ended up doing was telling the warehouse guys to drop the 2 pallets of bottles at my parents' front door. I was back at theirs for Christmas in Kent, and so they came, they delivered the pallets, and me and my sister spent quite a few evenings and days relabeling. We got more labels printed, and we spent a lot of time relabeling those first bottles because I couldn't go out there and sell a product that didn't look right. It was a big learning for me that things will go wrong, but I needed to find that. Essentially, that meant I needed to find a new manufacturer.
So you've simultaneously got a month and a half to turn around this huge order. You found another bottler, and
I did.
Were there any other big challenges in filling the order, or was it fairly smooth after that sizable hurdle?
It was touch and go because obviously this was the first time. I was flying by the seat of my pants a little bit because I was still the only person working in the company as well. So there were lots of big learning curves for me. I'd never worked in operations. I'd never worked in logistics. And then dealing with Sainsburys warehousing team. And God, it feels like a while ago. I've probably blocked it out of my memory now because it was painful. But I think I was also hugely excited about seeing it in store. So that probably cancelled it out a bit. And that was a vision. So made it happen. We found a way to get the bottles on shelf in the end with relative ease. There were undoubtedly a few teething problems on the way, but nothing that that was disastrous.
I think the challenge we often have in the entrepreneurial community is we say resilience is such an important part of being a founder, which is utterly true. But I do think it's helpful maybe to share with people who are early in their journeys as well, just this reality of if you are having a sobbing in your living room moment, then you are not alone, and it is not potentially as catastrophic as it feels in the moment, and others have been through it and recognize it and are here now years on, stocked in multiple supermarkets, hopefully now with a bottler who you can trust and not doing any labeling. But I think it is, we forget sometimes the emotional toll that we're putting ourselves through, and as you say, it's almost, we forget it when we see our vision realized, when we see our product in the store. So maybe we don't talk about it as much as early stage founders need to hear that actually this is really hard.
Yeah, and I've been thinking a lot about that recently. I think there is a tendency to only share the good stuff, because when you're really small and perception is reality, you want to be seen to be doing well, because if you're seen to be doing well, then people are more willing to have a conversation with you. If they see things going wrong all the time, then maybe they won't pick up the phone. So it's definitely that innate sense of, I have to share all the good stuff. But actually, I think more recently, what I've been trying to do is share some of the low points. We had a big lorry fire in the run up to Christmas, a massive sport vehicle that was carrying quite a lot of bottles caught fire on the motorway, and fortunately the guy who was driving was safe, but the stock was completely destroyed, and this was right before one of our busiest periods. So I decided to share that and the picture, which was just basically a lorry on fire with all our stuff on it. I think it is important to show the low moments as well, because it is like a roller coaster. You get the highs, but also you get the lows, and it's important to look back and see how far you've come. So I'm trying much more to share that now, to give people reassurance that it's not all good. There are realistic low moments too. I think we sometimes, as female leaders, we have strengths within leadership that are really great attributes. We're quite often empathetic leaders. We really care about the people we're leading and our employees, and sometimes people can misconstrue that as a weakness, or we feel that, does that make me look weak? What I've realized over the last 6 to 12 months, or as I've developed as a leader, is that actually I should lean into that more and not see that as a weakness, and actually that real strength of mine and the strength of women. But I think that does build with confidence over time, and a lot of women do lack confidence. What's helped me build my confidence is by seeing something I want to get after, and having been able to do it, I realized, well, actually, I can do that. So maybe I can do this. Maybe I can do the next step. But you have to build that on your own. Not everyone is born with a real sense of confidence. And if they are, they're really lucky, because often it takes a while to build that. But I think if you continually prove to yourself that you can do something and have the right support around you and the right people around you, then you're putting yourself in a space which, don't surround yourself with negative people that tell you can't do something. Or if you are in that situation, then turn it on its head and use that as an opportunity to prove them wrong. That's what I've done in situations where people have said that's a stupid idea, or now I got that when I first left my job. I'm sure there are people behind closed doors going, why the hell is she launching a non-alcoholic drinks business? That's stupid. And look where we are now. So I think it's how you perceive things, and quite often I've had to feign confidence or things that I feel that I'm lacking in until I know and I feel that I can do that. So I think whatever works, but unfortunately sometimes as women and women in business, we do feel like we have to overcompensate for certain things where we don't have to.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. And I hope people listening from this both take it on themselves to, as you say, just start doing and the confidence builds. So to not expect themselves to look like the entrepreneurs that they see necessarily lauded as some of our big success stories, who look like they've had that confidence from day dot, though they probably haven't either. But also to know that there is a new wave of entrepreneurs coming through who do have, as you say, that empathetic leadership will become more and more recognized and more respected as well at the same time. So I want to briefly touch on your business model in COVID, because we talked at the beginning, you went and tested in bars and restaurants, and obviously you launched 2019 and then we hit this road bump that we all know and despise, the pandemic. And so how did that change your business model? Suddenly hospitality was pretty much shut down here in the UK. What was the impact?
Yeah, it was an interesting one in a way, because February, March was marking the start. February, March 2020, I should say, was really a period which was going to mark the start of our big entrance into the on-trade, into bars, restaurants, and so on. And we've been lucky enough to win some listings with a chain like Revolution Tequila, City Pub Company that had a chain of about 50 pubs. Revolution Tequila, I think, had about 20, 30. So really excited about that. And then literally, I think it's been on menu for 2 weeks and COVID hit. So it was really disappointing for the industry and for us as a brand, that a big part of our sales plan just was no longer possible. Where we're more fortunate is that because we haven't established yet sales in that channel, we weren't left as exposed as I know other drinks brands were, particularly spirits brands, alcoholic brands, that did rely on a huge chunk of their sales within the restaurant and bar world. So although it was really disappointing, we were lucky that we only just started that journey. We're also fortunate to be trading with big supermarkets and have really good distribution with supermarkets like Sainsburys, be online and had been for a while with online retailers like Amazon. And we also had our own website to fall back on. So those were two channels which actually did pretty well over COVID. There was a small period in retail where shelves were empty. They did let the beers or wines and spirit aisles run dry while they were focusing on more important things, like restocking the toilet roll shelves.
Yeah.
But after that, actually, things started to do really well. And what we found was, in the beginning of lockdown, people were drinking more because it's a bit like a holiday. You get to work from home all the time, don't have to go into the office. And then I think it started to dawn on people that this wasn't going away. A lot of people were unfortunately falling ill, and it was a real risk to a lot of people, and we couldn't go out, and that had a really detrimental impact on people's mental health. So what we found as a company selling non-alcoholic drinks was that after the first lockdown, people actually started to experiment a lot more with alcohol alternatives, because food and drink was still a really important part of their day, and actually was a really big part of their enjoyment. I don't know about you, but I was going out, when I was going to the supermarket, I was buying slightly nicer food because I enjoyed cooking, and frankly, it was the only thing to do apart from join a Zoom call for a quiz with the family, which got a bit dull after a while. So we saw an influx of new customers over that time, and it was a really interesting period. Not something that I'd want to go through again, because it was also incredibly stressful. I definitely felt the real risk that my business could fail and could go under. That was a risk not just for me, but a lot of entrepreneurs out there. But I think it put me into fight or flight mode. I was definitely in flight mode. I was saying to myself and to the team, if this is not going to mean the death of our business, we're going to work harder than ever. And the team really rallied around and pulled together, and we were able to get through that period. I don't think we had much of a break, but we did a lot during that time, things that I'm really proud of. And not just selling, but we managed to develop a second liquid and launch our second bottle, Dark and Spicy, later that year in November 2020. So really proud of that. And going to 2021 with a really kind of positive outlook.
Amazing. Reflecting back on that journey up until now, both in terms of bringing a new product to market, obviously incredibly complex, and also launching a direct-to-consumer brand, which I think is one aspect of what you've done. Obviously, you're also going via retailers, via hospitality, so not pure D2C. But are there learnings that you had along the way that you just wish someone could have shortcut for you up front, that, you know, or things that actually you did learn from experts where you thought, gosh, like this actually changes what I was planning to do entirely, and thank God you told me?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I've learned is around people and hiring people. You're definitely, as an entrepreneur, not going to know it all, and you'll have maybe a specialism in one area, and you can be a generalist for a little while, and that's, you know, okay, and actually that's quite good if you're able to spin a lot of plates and juggle things in the beginning when you're quite small. That's important, but as you grow, it becomes less important, and actually you need to go back to what you're great at and really thrive and develop in that area. And you need to hire people in the things that you're not great at, whether that's, you know, finance, operations, marketing, sales, whatever it may be. I think for me, that was a big learning, getting really good people in early on. I think a lot of entrepreneurs can see it as a cost, and it's quite tempting to scrimp on that, or maybe not spend as much as we should spend. I think what I've learned is, you know, good people cost money. Good people want to be paid what they're worth in the market, and if they're a hot, you know, salesperson or marketeer, then of course they're going to want to be paid well. And you have to do that at a time that's right for the business and at a time you can afford it. However, if you get someone really good, that can be worth having 2 or 3 average people. In fact, sometimes having 2 or 3 average people or having one person that's not great can actually be detrimental. It can work the other way. So you do need to be really on it. I've learned that. Prior to running my business, I had very limited hiring experience or experience of the recruitment hiring process. So I had no idea how to hire good people. I had no idea how to find good people. I had no idea how to interview good people, what to look for. So I had to learn all of that. So maybe I wish someone had told me that sooner.
Where did you go to learn it, or did you just learn it on the job?
Well, no, I think it happened more organically for me in that I knew I needed to develop as a leader. So I've taken sort of leadership and management courses, and then through that I've met people who are experts in leadership, and so I've spoken to them. I've had recommendations for podcasts and books. So a lot of it's been self-taught.
And what are some of the things you do differently now in how you recruit practically to where you started?
I think a lot of people waste time in the interview and recruitment process, probably interviewing people that should never have made the shortlist. Like I speak to a few people that say, oh, I've spent an hour with this person, actually they were totally not right. And kind of think to myself, maybe I say to them, why did they get to that stage? If they're so totally not right, why you've just spent an hour of your day, maybe in the interview, maybe an hour for that, back and forth, arranging the interview, asking questions. So suddenly you've invested 2 hours of your working day on someone that actually should never have got through. So there are things you can do right from how you find people to then how you shortlist people. You can do that by writing a really good job spec. And I don't mean just going on the internet and copying and pasting what you think the role should be. Actually thinking about, what is this person's mission and purpose in my organization? What do I need them to achieve in a year or 2 years' time? Write that goal for them and then work backwards from, okay, so then in order to do that, what qualifications do they need to have? What skills do they need to have? What do they need to be able to do? Have they done it before? You can then use all that to then shortlist and find the right people. And you can make the screening process really efficient and worthwhile in terms of the questions that you ask, in terms of the times you limit yourself to spending 20 or 30 minutes screening people. It doesn't have to be an hour. There are small wins you can make to streamline the whole process and make sure you're cutting out things that are just going to waste time. Because time is one of the most important things when you're running a business, and people often say, to me, either have done in the company or when I talk to other entrepreneurs, is like there are not enough hours in the day. So if you can find a way to make the things that you're doing more efficient in a way that benefits the business positively, then you should absolutely do them.
And I guess this is even more true for you because you're, solo founder. You've been leading this business ultimately without what is normally a right-hand person who can split a lot of the big decisions. So how's that journey been for you as a solo founder?
Yeah, it's been pretty lonely, for it lie. At times, I've always had a strong support network around me. They may not be expert in business, and by that, my friends and my family, who have always been incredibly supportive of me right from the beginning. When I said to my mum and dad and my sisters, I think I'm going to start a business, they never said anything negative. They might have thought it, but they were always really supportive of me and my decision, which is great. So I kind of rant to them about when stuff goes wrong. And then I guess on the business side, I've grown a network around me of other entrepreneurs that can really understand the issues and the problems that I'm going through and can really relate. Because I think that's important, relatability, that someone can understand what you're going through and maybe advise you, or has been through what you're going through and can advise, or vice versa. So I think if you are a solo entrepreneur, you shouldn't worry too much. You just have to make sure that you have got that support around you, because it will be lonely. And I think the thing that I probably missed out on in the beginning, in the early years, was just being able to have those conversations around, when it came to making decisions, having that back and forth. Should we do this? Should we do that? I'm quite a decisive person, and I do like to weigh things up, and I do like to talk to a few people, but maybe having that, co-founder or a couple of founders to bounce ideas off of and have a discussion around would have made the decision-making process a little smoother and a little easier. Because sometimes you just don't know things. You just don't know them because why would you? You've never done it before. So you have to go out and find someone that does know, sorry, and get advice from them. So it can be tough. You've got to spin a lot more plates. I was always really envious in the beginning of brands that had a founder that looked after operations and a founder that was on marketing and a founder that was on sales. I thought, oh, that'd be nice. That's not me, unfortunately. There was a lot to do in the early stages. You're right. Did I have a plan? I had a project plan. I was working full time. And so there were all these jobs to do, research to be done. And so me, my sister, my dad got involved as well. They would help with small stuff because they cared. They wanted me to get the business off the ground. And so they were willing to dedicate what probably ended up being an hour or two of their time a week, in some cases more. And it worked. So I think if you've got people that are happy to help in the beginning, then definitely take advantage of that.
Digging into that a little bit, because you continued to work for a long time while you were setting up the company. At what stage did you decide, right, now is the time to quit my job and go full time on this?
Yeah, I had the very practical predicament of how was I going to support myself, and I had a mortgage, I had a house. So how was I going to pay the mortgage if I didn't have a job? And at the time I didn't have money coming until I had money coming into the business. And even then, would I be able to pay myself? I had a bit of a predicament in that leaving my job meant not getting any income. And that was a really big kind of leap. And quite often for people, it's the biggest question. What's the right time to do it? And in the end, the right time for me, it was a year and a half after I initially had the idea. I'd come into a bit of money in that I'd won a bursary. So talking around £10,000. I also had some of my own savings that I put in. So I worked out that I could pay myself a little bit of money, enough to live on and pay the bills, and quit my job. And then between that happening and launching, obviously the Sainsburys contracts came into play. So in order to make that happen, I would need investment. So at that point, I started looking at investment options, and what I would need to finance the production and some of the marketing to support the listing and things like that. So that's where I really started thinking about the financials. And of course, within now, I'd pay myself. As a founder, you're worrying about the business and you're worrying about growing the business. What you don't want to be worrying about is paying the bills, and you want to take that on the table. So you just need to make sure that you've got enough to live on and pay your bills without having to worry about it. So I did it. I left my job at a time where I could make the financials just about work.
And that bursary you got, that was a grant that you applied for the business?
Yeah, it was through an accelerator scheme, and so they didn't take on all of the brands that worked with them, but it was a bursary which included some mentoring as well. So
Great.
it was a kind of good for me, and I thought, why not? I think what people don't realise how much there is out there. We're so lucky in the UK. There are so many grant bursaries, so many government funded initiatives to really help entrepreneurs. That was one thing I took advantage of, but there are also government backed schemes where you can go and get training and access to workshops. It's not just all monetary. It can be around upskilling. And so you really just need to go out and look for it because money and access to funds in the beginning is so important, even if it's just to get your idea to a concept that's good enough to get in front of an investor.
And so you got it to that stage and you went to investors, and you said that was at the point where you were trying to finance essentially production and marketing for that Sainsburys deal. So there was a bit of a clock on it, or were you looking, how was that piece working?
Yeah, I needed to go into 2019, my launch year, with investment secured. I knew that. So that was and because I needed to start financing production sort of late December, early January. So I needed money. I think initial funding was I needed money to produce bottles and buy stock and finance the production. I needed a little bit of money for marketing. I wasn't spending loads, but I was doing mostly social media marketing and some advertising through Facebook. So it was mostly online. Did a few events, but that was just mostly me driving around London with my car and a bar in the back. That wasn't too expensive. And then some events come summer. And also, I needed a little bit of money to start bringing people in. Hire my sister to come in and do the operations and marketing. And then later on, we brought in a full-time marketing manager, and my sister moved into ops. I needed a salesperson. So I needed to pay people to help me sell the product and market it and make sure we got it onto shelf. So it was a bit of a mixture of overheads and marketing and production.
And so when you were thinking about funding, what kinds of questions did you have in mind? Both how much did you know about what investors would be looking for from you at this stage? How clear was it what you'd need to raise? And also what you were looking for from investors? Because I think this is a question we often forget to ask founders is, what do you want to get out of your first fundraise? Because typically that's not going to be VC capital. You're talking probably angel investment, people who are going to be smart money. They're going to bring you a huge amount of experience alongside the capital. So how were you thinking about this, or how much were you thinking about this? Because honestly, sometimes it's more of a race to keep funding our businesses, and we don't have quite the time to pause and ask all the questions we later wish we had.
Yeah, you should definitely do as much research as possible about the different routes for funding if you are looking to bring funds into your business for a start. And that's what I did. I went out and looked at the different options available to me. Like you said, you've got VC funding, angel investment, you've got crowdfunding. So you've got to look at what is possibly the right model for you, and also how much you want to raise. How much are you willing to give away? How quickly do you want to scale and grow? So for me, that just involved talking to people that knew more about this than me, because I had no idea about investment, never done anything like this before. So I was completely new to it and learning. So I just wanted to understand as much as I could about the different ways of doing it, and just wanted to find the best route and option for my business. And you talked about smart investment. Do you want an investor that understands your category and your industry, or do you just want money and you want them to stay out of it? And because that can be another factor, and that's quite personal to the entrepreneur and the business owner. You may be really experienced in what you're doing. You may have done this before, therefore you may just want to go to a company that's going to just give you cash and nothing else. Or you might be relatively inexperienced and you may want the support and the advice as well.
You said you went and spoke to people. What kinds of people did you speak to? How did you find them to talk to in the first place?
Probably LinkedIn. I did a lot of messaging on LinkedIn. I still do, but back then just asking for help a lot more. Yeah, I think it was LinkedIn and going to different networking events, just putting myself in situations where I would meet the right people and talk to the right people who knew more about it than me. So that's what I would recommend. There's so much information available online about the different routes for investment. Books. I probably didn't read enough books as I should have done, but I listened to a lot of podcasts, but there's so much information out there. So if it's important to you and you want to raise funds, then just make sure you understand all the options available to you and pick the ones that are right for your business.
And as you say, not being shy about asking for help, because I think that's something we also all feel a bit uncomfortable about, messaging people cold on LinkedIn just to ask for their help without anything necessarily we can offer at this stage. And I think prospective founders would be very surprised how many people will just say yes, genuinely from the goodness of their heart, because they want to help if they have the capacity. And lots of people will say no because they don't have the capacity. That's okay too. You've just got to keep trying. I use LinkedIn a huge amount to reach people, whether it's for this podcast, whether it's for sales for my company Guestworks. And I had to go through a huge discomfort stage before. Now it just feels very normal, and I have quite a low threshold before I'll reach out to someone I've never met before to connect, and then very quickly follow in with an ask, and be ready for them to say no, and that be okay, but also be ready to chase them a bit if I really need what I'm asking for.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I can remember the first time walking into a restaurant or a bar, and I was terrified. I was really out of my comfort zone. But I forced myself to do it because I knew I needed to do it. And then once you've done, like you're saying, once you've messaged a few people, and in my example, once you've gone into 2 or 3 bars and actually it's not that bad, people are willing to talk to you. The worst they can say is, yeah, I'm too busy, sorry. Then you realize actually it's not so bad, and you just gain a bit of confidence. So it's just that initial kind of pulling Band-Aid off, or whatever they say, just getting over that initial fear.
That is a muscle memory that you build. The ability to stop people in a cafe and ask to pick their brains is we are not trained for it. We're not taught that socially acceptable, and so you have to untrain yourself a huge amount. And often when I see and speak to founders who aren't speaking to customers, they'll give me a load of reasons why, but ultimately a huge part of it is just getting over that emotional friction of, but it feels cringe, it feels uncomfortable, I don't want to be rejected multiple times, thanks, I can just launch it, I think I know what I'm doing, let me just launch it. And so much, as you say, is just, it's gonna feel honestly pretty awful the first few times, and that probably means you're doing it right if you feel that level of deep discomfort.
Exactly.
So you've caught us up to speed on how you've been testing the business so far, how you've got it to where it is, which is ultimately you're in some incredible stores. You've got your direct-to-consumer traction channel as well, and you're now really going back after hospitality again. Now COVID is opening up and allowing it. So what is next? What are the big risks that you want to look at testing next in the business? What is getting you excited, and what are you really curious about for Caleño's future?
I think the one thing that gets me really excited about in the business is delivering on our mission, which is to bring more joy to people not drinking and show people they don't need alcohol to have a good time. And I believe a few ways we can do that is actually by being that really fun, energetic, exciting brand that shows up, whether you see us in a supermarket, whether you see us in a bar or at an event. There'll be something going on that makes you want to come and try. Caleño. And that, to me, delivering on that mission, which we will be this year and beyond. And I think, obviously, with people being stuck at home and that one-to-one interaction with people being quite limited and difficult, I feel that it's not been as easy to do that as I would like. So now with world opening back up and being able to do in real life events, I feel that we can really go forth with that mission and deliver on that. So that is one thing that's really exciting for me. I think the second one is international expansion. So we are in the process of launching into different markets. I really love learning about new cultures and new markets. And so launching a brand that obviously I'm so familiar with, but into a new market with different sets of challenges and different nuances, I find personally really exciting. Hopefully means I get to travel a little bit more and go to other markets, and also just brings about new growth. I think export is a really exciting way to grow the business, especially when you've become more established in your own market. We've still got lots to go after in the UK market, but I'm definitely seeing those green shoots, in some of the other markets that we're starting to work with at the moment. So that's really exciting.
Incredible. So before we wrap up, were there any other myths that you wanted to bust that you've come across in entrepreneurship, or that you feel like founders shouldn't be subscribing to but still do?
Yeah, I'm laughing because there is one that I just thought of, and it goes back to that question of what do you want to get out of your business. And I think there's this myth that if you start a business, you'll have all this free time. I don't have to go to an office. I'm my own boss, and I can do what I want. And of course, you can do all of those things, and you can wake up when you want, take lunch when you want, finish when you want. But the reality is you work harder than you've ever worked before. And I don't know about anyone else, but I personally put myself under pressure. And because it's your own thing, it's your own business and it's your own livelihood, and you really care about it. I actually end up having less time, ironically. And I think I just had vision of a business owner clocking off at 3 and, rolling in at 10 a.m., taking leisurely lunches. I don't know what I was thinking, but it's none of those things. So that is one big myth that I will debunk. And if there are founders out there and business individuals that can do that, then good on you. You've obviously been at it for a long time, and you're able to do that. But 3 years into the business, not the case at all.
And ultimately, some of us are mad enough to still walk in, but it's good to know that up front, like that's the reality.
And I get to just counterbalance that with you will have so much fun along the way, and probably not painted the best pictures, but if you're enjoying what you're doing, you've really got that sense of confidence in that you're making the right decisions for your career and for you, and that's making you feel happy. You will have some of the most exciting moments of your life and your career throughout that journey. So that is the payoff.
What a great note to end on as well. So if you want to follow Ellie, where's the best place for them to follow you on social media?
You can follow me on LinkedIn, just Ellie Webb, under Chief Joy Maker, my job title, and also Caleño_Ellie on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. Or you can head to The Joyful Drinker, which is a podcast that I've launched for people that want to drink a little less. And it's a podcast where we talk about all kinds of things, drinking habits, but also healthy habits that you can bring into your week to help bring about a little bit of balance.
I'd highly recommend it. Go and have a listen if you haven't already, and listen more if you have already. And again, thank you so much for your time today, Ellie. It's been a pleasure.
You're right, Patty. It's been brilliant being on. Thank you for having me.
That's it for this episode. It's been a pleasure recording it for you, and we hope you love it. If you do, please do take a moment to give us a few stars, or 5, on your podcast app of choice, so lots of other founders can find us too. And for those of you curious what I get up to when not interviewing founders for this show, I have a new startup, If We Raise, aiming to get expertise and capital to underrepresented founders earlier. You can follow what my co-founder Tim and I are up to via @IfWeRaiseTogether on Instagram, or @IfWeRaise on LinkedIn and Twitter. We'll be sharing our lessons learned along the way, as well as highlighting the incredible founders and angel investors joining the If We Raise journey.